Although receiving news that you are plagued by a terminal disease such as cancer has a crippling effect on victims, the effects are even more intensified with age. In the case of Joan, a 68-year-old Florida resident, her recent cancer diagnosis has left her with no other options. After watching her first husband suffer from the same deadly disease, Joan has proactively set her death date. She reports she cannot stand the idea of making her second husband go through the same suffering as she did with her first husband. As such, she has retrieved the necessary drugs to commit suicide. Yet she was not the primary source of acquiring these drugs or determining her procedural passing. When Joan was initially diagnosed with lung cancer, she immediately began researching alternatives to the painful death that awaited her. Through her research, she eventually found an organization called Compassion and Choices. This organization provides a list of medications that, when combined, will end the life of an individual. In an interview with Joan, she reported that she has acquired the necessary drugs and plans to administer them on Friday. This conflict spans across all ages and genders, and although it may not be a daily occurrence, there are thousands of individuals who share in Joan's conflicts. In Oregon, the Death with Dignity Act, which passed in 1994, legalized assisted suicide. Yet even before then, this was a topic of controversy. People have fought against this act and have tried many times to revoke it. However, studies show that during the life of this act, there have been a total of 1,173 prescriptions written, and of those prescribed, only 752 people died taking the prescription. This illustrates a common rationale amongst those considering assisted suicide, because when people are given the power to choose between life and death, many people may reconsider their initial decision. Effectively, this could prove evidence that the United States is lowering the suicide rate through elongating the decision process of those conflicted. Rather than having them make an often split-second decision, they have a mandatory waiting period in which they can often reflect on the decision. Even with this evidence, some people still do not want to accept assisted suicide as part of our society. Many believe that participating in assisted suicide affects the doctor's well-being. Most doctors and healthcare assistants chose their occupation because they wanted to save lives. Allowing assisted suicide to take place creates a hard situation for doctors. Even in Oregon, where it is legal, there are still many doctors that will not participate in assisting a suicide. However, some doctors strongly believe that assisted suicide can have positive results. Dr. Timothy Quill, a palliative care physician, stated that turning off a ventilator and assisting in a suicide are very similar in nature. However, in his final conclusion about assisted suicide as a whole, he states, "When someone really requested you to hasten their death, that is a huge threshold you have to cross." Many doctors agree with him on this point and do not take part in assisting in suicide. Conflict also arises when the patients choose the assisted suicide based on information that may not be entirely accurate. No doctor wants to give an improper diagnosis in any situation. But when there's a life on the line, it is considerably more important to ensure accuracy in findings. There are many stories that report doctors lying about the severity of an illness in order to justify hastening a patient's death. Because the Death with Dignity Act is so strict, it is hard to get someone approved to participate in the program, and this can often lead to the improper diagnosis. One of the qualifications states that the person must be reported as terminally ill by their personal physician and a second consulting physician as well. Terminal illness is not very common, so it can be hard for patients to fulfill this requirement. Some patients even believe that they do not need to be considered terminal in order for them to have the life-ending drugs administered. However, according to the rest of the country, being terminal is one of the top requirements in order to receive assistance in committing suicide. Although it may sound awful, if a patient is diagnosed to be terminally ill by the two professionals, and they ultimately decide to follow the process all the way through, some may see a perceived benefit to society as well as the individual. As with many controversies in the United States, money finds a way to be continually considered and discussed. Considering generalities, when looking at older generations who may have fought in wars and were unable to earn a college education, they may not have similar benefits in medical insurance coverage as younger citizens. In fact, it is not uncommon at all for an older person to have no employer-provided medical insurance. This results in the use of Medicare, which essentially puts the weight of their medical expenses on the younger working class. Some believe that in many ways this seems to be unfair, especially when an older person is not just accepting of death, but wishing to die rather than suffering through their more painful alternative. In situations such as these, it may be a better decision for the person to be assisted in suicide if they wish. This would allow them the freedom to choose how and when to go, as well as making the process of death a potentially less damaging experience, as no one wants to see their loved ones slowly lose their consciousness, awareness, or be in immense pain. Allowing patients to choose their time of death can make the life of both the patient and their family easier. The patient can die in good peace, knowing that their life is ending at a time when they are surrounded by friends and family that truly care about them. It also makes it easier to distribute the wealth that may be remaining. When a person dies unexpectedly, it can be hard to tie up loose ends and distribute the wealth accordingly, and if they are struggling as far as to no longer be perceived as competent, then it is illegal for them to sign any contracts, so they may have pushed off updating or creating their will, and now their family members are going to lose their loved ones' possessions. However, if a terminal patient has a date set for their passing, they will be more motivated to take care of these important issues, and knowing that they have taken all the necessary steps to leave peacefully, it will be a less stressful process to undergo. This peace and comfort will extend to the remaining family as they no longer have to worry about finances, and they can focus all their attention to enjoying the last hours of their family member. Although it would be hard to consider your relative, friend, or spouse living longer than they chose to, there would be a peace in knowing that they chose to die surrounded by loved ones rather than potentially dying scared and alone in the middle of the night. It is obvious that assisted suicide is a controversial subject around America. There are many arguments and rebuttals for each side, but the truth is that nobody can escape death. Whether or not your death is assisted by a physician or occurs due to natural causes, we will eventually face the same fate. Although some Americans have very strong opinions, understanding both sides of this complicated issue is necessary before declaring a stance. Considering the opinions and views that support the opposite decision will open doors for you to educate other people, and to help them reach their own conclusions. Regardless of any biases or strong opinions that you may hold, the next time you hear about an assisted suicide, you need to consider and understand that individual's views, pain, and realize that it is currently their freedom to choose, and no family appreciates you voicing your outside, possibly inconsiderate opinion, while they grieve over the one they have just lost.